So if you want to detect hallucinations, what are some of the ways that people want to do that or have done that in the past? I say probably the most important or most common idea that people have had is to use NLI models. So in NLP, this area called natural language inference or recognizing textual entailment, which is a bit of a mouthful. This is best illustrated with an example. This problem's been around a long time. Basically, it's basically a three-way classification between two pieces of text, usually two sentences. So you're given a premise, and then you ask the model, is that it? And then you're given a hypothesis, which is a statement usually related to that premise, and you say, does that hypothesis, does it entail the premise, meaning can it be concluded from the premise, or is it consistent with the premise in some way? Is it neutral, meaning it's not really, you can't really derive any information from it? Or does it actually contradict the information in the premise? So to give an example, in each of these cases, the premise is about a church choir singing to the masses as they sing songs from a church, from a book in a church. So an example of entailment is, or from that sentence, the hypothesis, the church is filled with song. Well, that seems reasonable, right? That you can infer that from the original premise. So that's an example of entailment, or where you have data that is consistent in the hypothesis with the premise. A neutral example would be the church has cracks in the ceiling, has nothing to do with the original text. That may or may not be valid, but you can't conclude that from the original premise. And then you have a contradiction, which literally contradicts the facts in the original premise, which is a choir is singing at a baseball game. Well, the premise specifically states they're singing at a church. So that's contradictory information to what was presented. So you can see this is quite analogous to hallucinations, because those latter two cases will be considered some form of hallucination. One is that you have some information that was provided that was not consistent with the source text, and so it's not really relevant and could be hallucinated. Because there may not be cracks in the ceiling, you can't infer that from the information given. And then in the other case, it's literally contradicting the facts and changing them. So a lot of work is taking those kind of models and those data sets and adapted them as a proxy for hallucination detection. Again, mapping those last two cases to that of hallucinating. There's other approaches around Ngram, where you're just literally looking at the overlap in the terms and the phrases in the document and source, but those are very primitive. People have used question answering systems in a complicated way to sort of probe the original source. It's kind of complicated. I don't want to get into that too much unless you have questions about it. Other approaches are using the probabilities in a model as a proxy to determine factuality. So is the model's confidence in its own predictions, a proxy for hallucination? And that's probably a good input to a hallucination detector, but it doesn't solve the problem in and of itself. Because these models, again, often don't know what they don't know. And another approach is synthetic data. So we can generate a lot of synthetic data and try to provide examples of hallucinations where we know if they are or not hallucinated.